Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to this special broadcast, part of the Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav series on Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha. From the days of carrying each satellite on a bullock cart to now sending foreign satellites, launching orbiters to the moon and Mars, and now also attempting to land on the moon itself, India's space odyssey has come a long way. From its formative years in the 1960s to now, India's space journey has witnessed many memorable milestones. So as we celebrate 75 years of India's independence, we'll talk about some of the key achievements and transformations in India's space sector, our journey towards self-reliance, and the future of our space program, with a very special guest who's joining us in the studio. Absolute pleasure to welcome with us on Sansad TV, Mr. S. Somanath, Secretary, Department of Space and Chairman, Indian Space Research Organization. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you so much.
And absolute pleasure to have you on our program on Sansad TV. You know, it's a landmark journey that India is celebrating. It's our Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav. So, you know, the space sector has seen massive transformations. If we look back a little and trace the milestones, the major milestones that we have seen, as you know, the chairman of the premier space agency in the country, how do you look back from, you know, being dependent on a foreign country to launch our first satellite, Aryabhat? Today, we are launching, dozens of satellites for a host of several other countries. How has the journey been so far?
It's a long journey spanning almost 60 years. And it's a journey of cooperation to start with. When we had nothing in space program, when Sarabhai was dreaming that we should build this capability for empowering the nation to solve the problems of the people. And he was looking at how we can enable it faster by cooperating with other nations. And because of his magnetic personality, he was able to bring in people from US, USSR and French, who are in competition at that point in time, to bring a rocket to India and have the ground stations in India to launch this rocket, and also to bring a US satellite on top of India to beam television programs at that point in time and show that it is possible to communicate with the rural population through television during 70s. And he demonstrated this to the decision makers to show that space program is affordable for this country. Certainly. And because of that initiative by him, that we have this Indian Space Research Organization, Department of Space today, doing this activity last 50 years. And we made a journey of building things from the scratch, assembling people from across the globe at that point in time by Sarabhai, then building institutions across, developing capability for applications first, then satellites for those applications, then having the rockets to launch them. So that was a down line to the upper side. This journey is excellent because no other nation would have ever done this, maybe except in the recent times. And today, if you look back, we have a capability to launch anything that we want from our own soil. It is not a small achievement. In the last 50 years, the gap that existed between us and the nations who are having launch capability in 60s, now we have bridged that gap substantially to a scale that we can be very proud of.
Absolutely, and we have also achieved several firsts, yes, not just try to cope up with what the other countries have done, and in a way we have done things that no other country has. Yes. ISRO, of course, has been leading this journey, this epic journey, to say precisely, over the last 6 decades or so. What, according to you, would be the most remarkable, most significant milestone that ISRO has been engaged with until now?
I won't put it in a single event. I think it's if you say like that, then it won't be doing justice to the cause for which the organization has been standing for. See, I can talk about the mission to Mars. I can talk about the mission to Moon. I can talk about the indigenous rocket capability that we have built, indigenous satellite building capability we have built. But I consider still the most important element is applications. See, because of the space program and because of the communication and Earth observation capability we have today, the casualties due to cyclones have reduced from lakhs to tens. We were able to handle floods and other issues much more effectively. Our resources of this nation are better mapped today so that we have a knowledge about the nation in the form of, for example, how our water resources are utilized, how we can combat drought, how we can look at the agriculture yield in a year to say whether you should export or import at a given point in time. We have also cartographic surveys which allows us to map the entire nation to the survey level. We have our borders being protected by satellites, observing continuously and providing vital information to our people, having communication for the entire nation being sourced through the Indian satellites as well as leased satellites to handle all the television channels, and we said connectivity, it's not a small thing. I think the service for the people is the most important part, and the technology is only an enabler to it.
Absolutely. A lot of it that you've said, I mean, we've begun to take for granted perhaps because, in this generation where technology is something that we enjoy right since our birth. But one important, event which will will remain etched in the memory of every Indian is the Mars orbiter mission, perhaps because, the fact that we achieved that feat in the very first attempt and at a very, very remarkably, incredibly low cost.
The idea of going to Mars was already there. And we were looking at possibilities through theoretical means. We were running simulations and checking which rocket can actually take them. There was a team within ISRO who was looking at how we can conduct interplanetary missions, going to Mars, going to Moon, going to Venus, going to Jupiter, using our capability. There is already a report at that point in time, using the expertise available. And the report has been circulating, and we were discussing it for a very long years. But then there came an opportunity. The PSLV has become a very reliable rocket. It is available now. Its payload capability has been substantially increased to a level that it can now take a satellite of a significant size with a little bit of payloads going to Mars. And we have a confidence to build such a satellite. And when all of this came together at that point in time, the chairman of ISRO at that time, Dr. Radhakrishnan, took that very momentous decision. Yes, we should go ahead and build it. But the opportunity for launch was very, very nearby. We have only 1 or 2 years left for this work to be done, to conceive the satellite, build it, develop so many new things. One of the important new thing was the autonomy in satellite, for example. Because we can't communicate with the satellite and then get a command executed. It has to do it all by itself. So we took the challenge in that point in time and worked on it very, very hard to make it happen. And I must salute the entire team who identified how the payloads which are required for it, planned the mission to travel to Moon, to Mars, very unique manner. That also was the very first of kind that ever done, using a rocket called PSLV. PSLV is not a heavy launcher. It is a medium class rocket. Using a medium class rocket, I think nobody ever would have ventured into launching a probe to Mars. And that too we accomplished very successfully. Of course, with the help of so many people across the globe and their ground station support, their tracking support, all we used. But then ultimately the design of the mission was the crucial element, and satellite too worked. I want to tell you a very important message here. The satellite was designed for a 6 months life on Mars. It was working for almost 7-8 years without any problem and continued to give the data. So hats off to all those people who worked on those times in ISRO for conceiving and executing that mission.
Of course, it was a remarkable mission, and as you said, in a very small period of time, the manner in which you overcame all of the challenges. What was the global response like when we actually turned it into a success? It was a first for any developing country.
Yeah, see, we must say it was a first experience for us to have such a long duration mission, interplanetary mission. But we were not the first one, but the first one to succeed in the very first attempt.
Yes.
But see, it is like what Einstein said, I am able to see farther because I stand in the shoulders of the giants. So like this, we were able to learn from the mistakes of various other missions that was executed prior to us. The failures, the lessons were all in front of us. So if you are able to learn the lessons from that, of course we can conduct missions safely. But of course, every mission has its own challenges. But then planning it very well and executing well is another matter. So of course I can tell you the first came because of that we learned the lessons very well.
Since you spoke about learning lessons, a lot is spoken about how from the very beginning, 1960s till about 1990s, it was a period of, trials and tribulations for ISRO. So while some of our missions succeeded, in some of the missions we also tasted failure. What is it that kept our scientists, our researchers going in the face of limited resources, in the face of also limited confidence?
See, I can tell you, trace back to my life, my joining of ISRO. You talked about the time period in which I worked. The turbulent times of the 80s. When I was joining ISRO, the rockets were failing. The ASLV was not successful. The first 2 missions failed, and we were trying for the 3rd mission to succeed. And I was joining at that time. And I was seeing the type of the difficulty in the organization. People were not at all supportive of us, public. And they were even shouting at us when we were going to office, when we were waiting for the buses to come. And we were shouted upon, why you are doing all this? And the morale of the organization could have been very, very low, but for wonderful people inside. And once you go into the office, the atmosphere is not what you see outside. There were leaders who were able to motivate youngsters like me to do wonderful work. For even not to lose this job and go elsewhere, where many people trying to leave the organization at that time for greener pastures, and we were sticking to it just because we were able to see the bright eyes of some of my great leaders, and they were motivating us to do. You are working on something phenomenal. Your work on PSLV today, after 10 years, it was yet to be launched. I was working in 1985 when the PSLV was just on the drawing board. You can imagine that we were just seeing some sheets of paper where PSLV has not taken shape, and having the confidence to work on it for next 10 years to make it a reality. You must have wonderful people inside.
I can't even imagine, the strength that you get from within and from people like, from your peers as well in the field. Because as an anchor, I can tell you, whenever one of our shows doesn't do well, it keeps playing up in our mind for days together as to where I went wrong, what could I have done to, make it better. Even, as youngsters, one failure and perhaps it would affect us for days together. So when as young scientists, as young researchers, you invest in a project for months together, not just in the sense of the time, but the kind of effort.
Yes.
And how do you deal with failure then?
You are able to see only the launch at the last moment when it is telecast. But for us, it is a day in, day out affair. So we see systems being developed, and we see failures while it is being developed. And many a times there will be explosions, there will be failures, there will be breaking, and there will be fire. And we see them day in and day out. And the job what we have in hand is to handle that failure and then understand why it failed and make the corrective action. And our brain starts working when you see the failure. What could have gone wrong, which I couldn't imagine a priori. So, and this is the training that we got. And we are trained to handle failures. Like our Javans are trained to handle adverse situations. So we are like the Javans of the space. And we handle it that manner. And only if you have the guts to handle failures that you will be able to go to the success step. So failures have been part of our life, and rocket business is like that only.
Absolutely. As common citizens, we can only be thankful that, we have people like you who are thinking about national development and who have so much strength to deal with failures, learn from the failures and rectify those, in order to succeed with the future missions. Tell us what's the status of the Man Mission project. That's one pet project of the Prime Minister as well.
See, it started with an idea to once having a rocket called GSLV Mark III, which is a massive rocket to having capability to place human beings in space. And we were developing it to have a human flight capability, whole human-rated rocket. And we also did some missions called the crew escape test and crew module recovery, etc. So we have the background to handle such a mission. The approval for such a mission came from the government. Now to develop it towards actual human spaceflight, we need to go across many steps. The first step is called the rocket human rating. The GSLV Mark III rocket, which was originally designed as a non-human rocket, has to be now human rated. So you'll ask me, what exactly is this human rating? So when a human being sits on top of it, he feels like he's sitting on top of a huge building, and that's not going to collapse. No, it is a 50, 60-story building, very thin and long one, and everything in that is going to work very well. And if it doesn't work very well, then it will know itself. And it will know itself that I am not going to work very well, so better command it to abort. So he'll throw away the crew from the rocket far away, so that he will be saved by the parachutes later. At any point in the flight, it's not a waiting time. Even when it is flying, if it detects an anomaly, it will trigger itself to save the crew. And next step is that the crew has to be accommodated in a very compact space. You can imagine that you are sitting in a room for 3-4 days together without even moving. And the place must be a very comfortable environment for you to survive. And we need to make an environmental control and life support system to handle your breathing, your water requirements, your excretion, your communication, your control and other feeling. So that is a very complex system we are developing today to handle crew to be there. The crew has to be selected, trained to handle this type of missions. So our Indian crew is going through that process. Then we have to make a very critical item called abort system. That is, in case anything goes wrong, there must be another set of rockets that will take the crew away from the main rocket and put them safely in sea. And we have to develop the methodology to bring them back from sea. And sea is a vast place. And we need to have ship and control mechanism, tracking mechanism to bring it back wherever they fall in the sea. And all these are to be arranged over a period of time. And we have to go through many tests to prove this. All these concepts are proven through a step-by-step process. So we are going through that journey today. we thought that it can be all done faster, but I can tell you that cannot be done very, very fast. It has to go through very calculated and measured steps.
Of course, and since it involves humans, I mean, there is no scope for error as well.
Correct, yeah.
But, pardon me for asking again, but by when? I mean, by when time period? What is the time period by when we expect this
I am
mission?
not announcing a date today, but because I didn't want to do, because many steps are yet to be crossed. So unless I believe in talking about what you are going to do tomorrow. I will be more happier to speak about it. So I am going to do this year for human space flight and abort mission. That means we will have a launch of the crew module with an abort system this year to prove that in case an anomaly develops, it can be executed. So this is the first step this year. And next year, we will be doing a launch with an uncrewed rocket so that the first mission of the uncrewed target of the Gaganyaan can be accomplished. So those are the immediate targets for me.
Okay, coming to some of the policies and measures that the government keeps bringing for the space sector. One such policy is going to be the new space policy that the government has announced. It is going to unveil very, very soon. What is the scope and the potential of this new space policy? What are the kind of changes and support that it is going to provide to ISRO?
See, the space policy is primarily targeting non-governmental entities.
Okay.
ISRO has been the arm of the Department of Space to do the space research and development. Now, there are new actors coming in space sector, the industries who have been supporting ISRO, the startups who are developing new systems. They have to be empowered. What is empowerment is that current regulations and approaches are enabling only the government sector to build rockets, governments to build satellites, and government to provide all the services. It need not have to be like that. It is definitely a strategic sector, but still there are actors who are capable of building rockets now, capable of taking on the responsibility of the production of the systems, and they can provide services. So the space policy is primarily targeting on non-governmental entities who are interested to work in space, and how these regulations and hand-holding can be done to enable them to come up in the stature of building space industries in India. That is the whole policy.
Certainly, and we've been seeing in some other countries how the private sector has begun to play an increasing role in the space sector. So it is an effort to expand and bring in the private sector as well into the space sector.
Now, in other countries, if you look at, for example, US, the private sector is already there. The government started after the private sector. I think NASA came not because our private sector was not there.
Absolutely. So, are we looking to expand the scope and inclusion of the private sector in the Indian space
Yes, they are
sector?
already there in space sector, but they are currently as manufacturers of parts, and they are only subsystem providers. They are only builders of systems, but they do not have reached a level that they can design a rocket on their own, design a satellites on their own till now. But there are now new people coming in.
A few days ago, I had the opportunity to interact with some of the women scientists, and one particular concerning area about involvement of women in science, particularly the STEM disciplines in the country, is even though India has about 43% female graduates in STEM, only about 12 to 14% get into jobs, and this translates into jobs. What is the kind of effort that ISRO has undertaken over the years? We've begun to see several female scientists actually taking leadership roles when it comes to different projects within the ISRO. So what is the kind of environment that you have provided to women scientists for them to flourish, for them to be empowered in more ways than one?
I'll tell you, there are many elements. I think this is a very important topic we have been discussing, considering within the department all throughout the journey of the institution. First and foremost, there must be more women coming in. So we must ensure recruitment process has an advantage to the women. So we advertise in the advertisement that we give preference to women in scientist recruitment. It's written there in the recruitment. And while they are selected, I think the committees are advised to give preference to women. So this is one step. Second is, while in service, women go through various difficult times because the personal life and the official life of women are more connected than men. I think we recognize that fact that they go through marriages, they go child rearing, and they need to spend more time with the family compared to men. We need to have that approach within the organization to recognize that it is so. So their leave rules, their off-time work conditions, and their considerations by their payers and bosses has to be towards that, keeping in that point. So these elements are considered while they are promoted, where they are considered for review, in comparison with the men at that time. Not to cause hurt feeling to the men, of course. They should not feel that, okay, lesser contributing women are being promoted. I think such issues can happen. But still, we are, by and large, we are able to handle this issue to give worthy position to women when they show up their mettle.
Coming to the other aspect, do you think that, in a situation wherein our space science has, transformed manyfold over the decades, now there is a need to, build that linkage between science and society, somewhere that is missing in our country?
Yes, of course, the science has been taking a little backstage over the years. Of course, engineering is something that we are in space sector.
Yes.
The science side is always there, which looks at exploration, finding in new things. But if you look at the overall science scenario within the country, it requires really a shake-up. It has to start from the education sector. It has to start from the schools, the colleges, the recognition for the scientist. For example, somebody wants to do the basic science and want to make a career in that science stream, there must be a potential shown up. Then only young boys and girls will look up science, physics, chemistry, biology and science subjects. They will be keen to take up. And if you see the people in IT and business and other domains make a better life, who will go there? So the first and foremost thing, government and the decision makers to show that the science stream people, though they are passionate about it, they must also show a way for them to live a decent life through doing research and contributing to science. Another important point is, I have been hearing it quite a bit from people that we need to create an environment in education institution and research establishment for people to really contribute significantly.
In fact, there are reports that, the first National Science and Technology Research University is going to be set up in the country.
Yeah.
How significant is that going to be in, bringing about the transformations that you've spoken about?
We need to build institutions of great repute, and we need to place world-renowned Indian scientists as head of them to make a way, the first step in that. There are many Indians working abroad, doing fundamental research and making great contributions. Why they are not able to do it in India? This question we need to ask very, very carefully. And I think the change is happening. They have to be brought here if required, like the way Sarabhai did at the point in time to create the space program. Many of them were from Europe and US, came here to create the rocket designs at that point in time. We need to do that. We need to create research institutions where they are headed by renowned Indian scientists who can be brought here if needed to head this, so that a culture of research and publications and contributing to the overall science contributions will be shown up from this country. So this is very, very essential. And let us also imagine that fundamental contribution will not show a tangible economic benefit immediately. But long term, the power of a nation is nothing but the fundamental science outcome on which the industries are going to thrive. So the next step is that science research work and industry connect has to happen. So the science has to go from the laboratory to industry straight away. And there must be lateral movement of scientists from research institutions and industries.
Absolutely.
So this is what the Europe and Americans are really banking on. And their entire technology and industry work on this connection. That connection is absent here.
That kind of collaboration has to happen.
Yes.
Pardon me, Mr. Somanath, but this is a very personal question that I would like to ask you. Brain drain has been a very, very challenging, thing for India. And at a time when you joined the organization, now, of course, you're heading it. But when you joined as a young scientist, there would have been a wave of youngsters who would be leaving the country because of the shortcomings for better pastures, of course, in developed world. What held you back? What motivated you to stay back in India and serve? We are fortunate that you're leading the premier space agency today, but of course for personal growth, for better pastures, for better lifestyle, several of your peers would have migrated to other countries. What kept you back in India?
If you think back and then look at the reasons, I can only see it was a motivation given to by my seniors. There was nothing else. See, I was able to see that they are so passionate, and I find my bosses super people, and they were as capable as anybody that I can imagine. Dr. Madhavan Nair, who later became chairman, was my project director, and many others who became directors centers were my immediate bosses. And the type of passion that they have on the subject, and the energy that they radiate in front of you, will magnetically attract you. See, so I believed that I can do something. So when my colleague who was sitting around me at that time were resigning and going away, writing many competitive examinations and going for US, migrating into IT and many other places, I felt that let me continue here. So I can only tell you that I was finding exciting work within ISRO at that point in time.
So there were people who motivated you. Now you are motivating several other youngsters. What would be your message to the future budding scientists who want to stay in the country, serve India, and lead several other successful missions, which is ultimately our endeavor to make India a global hub of course, space exploration, and also all the future missions that we have planned to make them a success?
See, there is no lack of motivation today for youngsters. They know better than what I can tell them. So I am seeing it every day. I interact with many young people, not within ISRO, but outside as well. So I find lakhs of people are interested to join ISRO just because of the passion of knowing about space. So, but unfortunately, we can't take all of them within ISRO. But then I can only tell you that you can still contribute to space program by creating your own opportunities. That's what I'm seeing every day. Other day I was in Chennai looking at one of the rocket startup doing wonderfully well, Agnikul. Wow, 100 young people are so enthusiastically building an engine test facility, building everything from scratch. I told them I am able to see my younger days when of building from the scratch in shirts and trying to make a rocket oneself. I could see the energy in another company, Satsure in Bangalore, building a huge office space for after being successful in remote sensing data processing. And another rocket company in Skyroot in Hyderabad is celebrating their 4th year today. In fact, they are celebrating it today. That is on 19th of July. Now, I am seeing that youngsters requires more motivation outside ISRO to create the space ecosystem in this country. Youngsters can think differently than what is happening within ISRO. They can create a change in the approaches and also sometimes bring in frugal way of doing rockets and spacecraft than in ISRO. Within ISRO also, we need the motivation because ISRO's mandate is now different. ISRO continues to be the premier space organization to do novel things, to look at what the country needs in terms of strategic requirements, in terms of the overall country's requirements, and also mentor these new people. So youngsters have a different task at hand after being developed overall systems now.
Absolutely. So there's huge scope and potential. It's just that the right kind of environment has to be given to them. One final question, we are celebrating 75 years. We have talked about the transformations that the space sector has undergone and miles to go, of course, in terms of the future missions as well. But where do you see Indian space sector in about the next 25 years? The Prime Minister has described this period as Amrit Kal. So when we celebrate 100 years of independence, the future of India's space sector?
No, I'll put it in various ways. One, of course, is with respect to the economy of space sector, because the space sector has to survive on its own.
Yes.
So it requires to have to generate revenues. It also has to be self-sustaining, because it can be done only by providing services. And this is the first and foremost thing. So we need to look at how the overall space economy can be enhanced by appropriate industrial intervention and looking at markets and do things for the market. This is very important. Second point is in terms of observations and science part. The space is such a thing that it has a fantastic opportunity to do science. See, for example, the James Webb telescope that has been recently launched is opening the new windows to the universe. And which other technology have this potential to show the world what we are today? So we need to continuously invest in science programs, looking at Venus, looking at Mars, looking at the space weather, looking at the global climate change observation systems that we need to put in place, and understand this and warn the decision makers what way we have to intervene. Space has an important role to play. Space continues to remain an important role to play in terms of communication sector. And our communication is changing, now going to 5G and various other technologies are coming in. Space can be a very important enabler in increasing the communication capability so that the future generation will not be starved for internet connectivity wherever they are. Absolutely. To your devices, and space can enable that to happen. Human beings have to travel to space, and space technology has to become much more capable tomorrow for frequent travel of human beings. Not like it takes 1 year for you to travel, but it has to happen like you go to your neighbor's house, you should be able to go to Mars and Moon.
Absolutely. So, sea and space are the two sectors, two areas wherein there are limitless opportunities and wherein India wants to, of course, become one of the global leaders. So, we've spoken about the journey, India's epic journey in the space sector, the kind of, significant milestones that we have achieved over the last 6 decades or so, and the future of India's space program. So as you know, Dr. Somanath was pointing out, this journey has been remarkable, but there is miles to go. There is significant potential in the country. There are several young scientists, the youngsters who are interested in this particular sector and who are contributing, of course, for the growth of this sector. So we are hopeful that by the next 25 years, when India celebrates 100 years, India will have made a significant mark in the global space economy. So that's it from us on this special program today. Thank you, sir, for joining us on Sansad TV, sharing your thoughts with us and our viewers. Absolute pleasure to have you on the program today. So thank you once again for taking out time and joining us on the program.
Thank you.
So thank you, viewers. That's it from us on this special program. Keep watching Sansad TV and take good care of yourselves.